Hello, my name is Stefan Oliver. Kind of making this video to bring you out to where we're doing some agricultural farming at our house. We're starting off in the neighbor's backyard, 10 acres, almost 12 acres of land that used to be avocado, citrus, and also persimmons. It's kind of been abandoned now for a number of years, lack of watering. It's really dried out. The avocados themselves didn't make it through a drought, and a couple of fires rolled through, and since then has become kind of a junkyard. We've been in the process of using some of the old wood and debris as firewood and kind of cleaning up this property just because it's next door and we didn't really want to look at it, just covered with trash. So what we're looking at now is the shack. You know, this used to be filled with trash, and we've kind of slowly bagged it up and taken it out. Next to it is now some beehives. That's not us, it's actually an outside company who's come along and just put the hives out here to see how they do. So what we're going to do is we're going to walk along kind of this property and eventually make our way back to our house. And we're just going to talk about some of the methods that we've used and how it's different than some of the blueprints I'm finding. You know, we're starting off as farmers. We don't really have too many people or people on deck to tell us exactly what to do. So we've done a lot of book and research and experiment. I myself have a background in aquariums, in particular saltwater reef tanks. We're going to show you mine later on and how I've kind of been stuck at a point of what to do with saltwater aquariums. You know, it's my hobby, my passion. But what we're using now is the next generation of utilizing our waste. We're all kind of looking at where our trash goes and what effect it has on our surroundings. This is a prime example here. You know, this is kind of the entry of the property that had become a junk pile. We have roofing tiles. There used to be a 18-wheeler trailer parked here that was recently removed. Piles of wood. Now, there is some advantages to this, though, because the lot was abandoned. The wood piled up over a number of years. The trees have become sort of a haven for nature. We have red-tailed hawks breeding out here. The piles of wood have become nests for squirrels, made an abundant food source. Also made trouble for us. You know, eating our fruit trees that are just starting off within the first 5 years are not producing a whole lot of fruit. And the fruit that it did, the squirrels, they made it theirs before we even had a chance. But what's happened out here is, you know, we're sitting on decomposed granite mostly and a lot of clay. So a lot of these fruit trees are planted in holes, you know, just drilled straight into the clay. Small amount of composting is mixed in. You know, everyone has their source of composting, what they use. And then conventional farming was done as far as pesticides and synthetic fertilizers. You know, this is years and years later with droughts and negligence. A lot of the orange trees and citrus have now actually reverted back to lime trees. I'm assuming, and I've been told, that the roots were existent, they were cloned or grafted from roots of a lime tree, and because of the drought and neglect, the orange tree part of it died off and the limes came back. The limes seem to be doing very healthy out here right now. We're just at the beginning of winter, so leaves are starting to fall off a lot of our fruit trees. We grow a lot of subtropical mostly. We do have citrus and oranges. So let's start walking next door and take a look at our property and see where it gets us. A lot of the things that we really wanted to use was, or not use, were pesticides in particular. You know, things that instantly kill off bugs or some sort of biological media within our soil. You know, we are aware that the effects of that isn't very good. It leaves us with clay and not much organic activity. And then you have to rely on more chemical fertilizers due to that. So what we've done is we started off just like next door, is decomposed granite for the first 6 years, 7 years, and we started planting some of these fruit trees. Most of them were dug in holes the size of a 10-gallon container, not very deep, not very wide, and we had a lot of trouble starting them off extra water, unnecessary watering in particular. So we learned, and we composted, and we mulched. Our main source of mulch is free. It's delivered and it's composing mostly palm trees. You know, palm trees not normally conventionally used, but you thought it was a good free source, and I think most cities don't use a whole lot of pesticide on their palm trees. Not a lot of money in keeping them alive, so why waste it? So we have our piles of palm tree now kind of degrading and composting themselves. So the fruit trees we just walked by, that was spread about 2 years ago, a year ago, and it's about compacted down for its first layer. And what we're looking at is the original soil here, and it's just clay and decomposed granite. A lot of grass was growing in. So the composting holds in the water, kept the grass down, did a lot of good for us. Really hoping it brings down the water bill too. So we'll walk up here, kind of put the orchard at the bottom of the slope, the citrus trees at the very bottom, because we noticed that the road we just walked across was kind of an indicator for a frost line. That during the coldest part of the winter, the ice really didn't make it past the bottom of our road. So colder stuff that can withstand, you know, the frost, the citrus trees, they all kind of stay at the bottom. Then we have peach and pears and apples. They all make their way up. We have some cherimoyas and sapotes on the very edge. We have, we're walking over some raspberries that were just randomly planted out here. Still need to be mulched. Banana trees. So we make our way to the garden. The garden, this is where we kind of first started implementing organic composting. So as we were taking green compost and mixing it into our clay soil, it's very, very intensive. After 3 years, we noticed not much change. The soil every year was pretty hard, and we kind of went to the idea of doing garden boxes. And garden boxes seem like a good way to not have to take a shovel every single year and really dig deep down and then not have much of an impact. So taking some of the soil that we have existing and mixing it with outside sources of soil, you know, whether it was purchased, a lot of it was mix number 4, organic mix with perlite, sagebrush moss, and some gypsum. I don't think that was correct, gypsum. So let's make our way over to the garden boxes. So we kind of converted our rows that were in the soil to just doing tomatoes. We fenced them up. This is the end of the season. Tomatoes are pretty much done. We're getting one batch of cherries that are flowering non-stop, which is great, but it's not really producing much now. Garden box is all ready for rotation. As you can see, everything's pretty much at the end. We've torn out the watermelons and the squashes that were all growing in here. About one zucchini plant left and a bed of peppers. All this was just done with conventional freshwater, tap water. There was no special treatment made, no dechlorination. We just did straight hose water out here, but we did do composting with some calcium hydroxide. We did coffee grounds. We did some guanos, and also some perlites and vermiculite. Next bed down was our green bed, and almost none of the greens made it through a heat wave we had. But we did have eggplants and kales and Swiss chard for quite a while. Below that is our green onion and our strawberries. Now this is the end of the year, November right now, so it's getting colder, but we do have some warm spells. The strawberries are still hanging in there. But they're ready to be cloned out. They're ready to be taken out, torn apart, and replanted, or at least stored till next year. We had a tomato bed, or a potato bed that we ended up filling up with hay, and ended up being more of a worm culture bed than anything. The potatoes did grow, but not as much as we wanted. But we did pull up the hay and find some great worms to cultivate the rest of our beds with. So that was a really kind of good clue for the first year of doing a garden box. If you really want to establish microbacteria, to maybe avoid planting heavy nutrient requiring plants and to just stack it with thick layers of compost or some sort of mulch on top. Really keep it moist and let those worms and that microbacteria start. Because we've since planted one row of greens in here, and how fast they grew and how productive and how good they tasted was just great. There were raspberries or blackberries, kiwis at the top. They really didn't fruit that much this year. This is 2013, November, and this was kind of an odd year. We had fluctuations of temperatures all over, all times of summer. So the raspberries and blackberries, they didn't really fruit like I wanted them to, nor did they fruit like the year past. We had just bundles and bundles of raspberries and blackberries every day for a good 2 years, and just this year did not produce. We do cut them back, we replant, so it wasn't necessarily a procedure problem, it was a weather pattern problem. So this is all just, once again, conventional hose water, San Diego district, untreated watering. And what I'm going to go back to now is kind of my experimentation area where we theorized for a long time, or I've theorized for a long time with colleagues and people I've met along the way, keeping aquariums and keeping hydroponics, growing in soil and in water, and kind of taking in all that information and really learning and applying some of this knowledge. Where it's led me is having a foam salt aquarium and wanting to adapt some of that water waste. I did some research. There is studies done back in the 1920s, 1910 about organic farming and how saltwater, ocean water was going to, have an effect on soil, but the testing is very vague. A couple of videos out there that are very old. As far as recent, you go on the internet, there's not really a whole lot of references you can get that give you a defined answer on what saltwater agriculture, and what it is and where it went. But you do find a lot of commercial activity as far as multi-trophic systems and lagoons. So what we have to start with our farm is a water system. And this is an RO unit, not deionized, but all reverse osmosis. I just collected amongst trash cans, and the wastewater is also collected. I won't go into details, how we utilize the wastewater, but it is used mostly with compost teas and cleaning out our filters. Any water that we use while pressure washing goes into a barrel, and we reuse that. So we try not to waste too much on the ground, get as much in the garden as possible, whether it's landscaping, palm trees, or actual vegetables. We try to use the more pristine water, not the RO waste for our vegetables though. So the experimentation area was these kind of planter areas. And what it was originally was grass and morning glory. And it was torn out. It took about 2 years of heavy weeding by hand. But we stopped the seeds and started mulching and started adding salt water to it. It was kind of an experiment. It started off with one pot and a pot of Swiss chard. Swiss chard has kind of been the beginning of all of this. Swiss chard was very adaptable to salt. I noticed is that pouring salt water from a fish tank into a pot of plants, just about everything died right off the bat except for that Swiss chard. So it kind of gave me the idea to dumb down the amount of salt I was using and see what other plants I could use in that same pot. And as we diluted more and more, we kind of noticed doing a ratio of 1 to 10, so 1 gallon of salt water to 10 gallons or 9 gallons of fresh water had a lot of benefits as far as trace elements. And, my experience with reef tanks, what I'll show you is it contains a lot of calcium, a lot of magnesium, strontiums, iodines, a lot of your basic trace elements that goes above the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium that we're all accommodated to, just the top 3. The reef tanks gave you that multi-spectrum trace element, and I noticed just in corals over the years, lack of trace element, the coloration, and how it changes. And I thought, well, if a plant's looking dull or looking weak, why can't we give it some trace elements and see how it reacts? And then you start looking in the market as far as what trace elements are available, and it just goes for a loop. And they mostly focus on the nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. which is something I just was too narrow-minded for my research of aquarium water testing. Doing ammonia, nitrite, nitrate, pH were the basic four, but then we started doing the alkalinity, the calcium, the strontiums, the iodines, really becoming aware of what's in our salt water. And that knowledge of just knowing what's in your water tends to be the first step. Because that's what we're eating, that's what these plants are using. We really need to know what's in the water, what's in the soil, and it's just that first step of knowledge. So the salt water, it's not the normal home aquarium. We start off inside, where we do have our showpieces, where it is a normal fish tank, where we have artificial lighting. This is using metal halides in our case, but all the filtration we took outdoors. This includes refugiums, includes deep sand bed filtration, and also settling tanks. It's about a 500-gallon system right now. It's including 4 tanks, 5 fish tanks, about 100 gallons of water per volume. What we're doing is a 10% to 20% water change every week. What that means is we're changing about 30 gallons to 50 gallons of water every week. And that's a lot of water to just dump down the drain. And that's what most people who have an aquarium are doing, is right down the toilet or right down their backyard, and the water is just not applied anymore. So we started taking this water and seeing to what extreme we could apply it to the soil and what the effects were. This is all just a process of applying salt to your soil. You know, in organic farming, I've heard a lot of times people using Epsom salt. Well, Epsom salt, you know, what is salt exactly is a big question. You know, I can't answer that myself. The sources of salt are from all over the world, whether it's been cleaned or processed, or whether it's just been evaporated and put into a bag. In an aquarium industry, one of my favorites is a Red Sea evaporated salt. As far as the application in the food industry, the Celtic salts tend to be very good and most popular. I haven't experimented with the Celtic salts in the aquarium yet, or its effect on coral or fish, but we have done extensive with Red Sea salt. And this is over a 10-year, 15-year span of me being in the industry, in local fish stores, also within just subcontracting through independent farmers. So I'll show you, this is one of the experiments we started. This was outdoor coral farming, natural sunlight. A lot of the coral was sold off now. It took 2 years of just not moving it around and letting it settle outside and getting color and adapting to the natural sunlight, but what it's become now is mostly a refugium. So we've had a small ball of ketomorpha algae put in here about 6 months ago, and it's now taken up about 3/4 of this 4x4 table. And we also do still have our zoanthids, or our button polyps. You can see on here we have some of our SPS, or Phragmites corals, attached with polyps, and also are some tree corals. And then mushrooms. These are Fiji mushrooms. And also frog spawns, or euphyllias. These are LPS, or large polyp stony corals. Natural sunlight. They're doing great. And temperature is maintained about 75 to 77 degrees, so 2-degree fluctuation in the system. Right now we're showing you not exactly a pretty day out here. So it's cold and it's raining, and we have a real simple solution for that. We cover it back up. As far as the open areas go, we do have a sump. The sump is where we contain all our filtration. This goes for most fish tanks over 100 gallons. A sump tends to be a real handy thing if you don't want a lot of equipment hanging into your fish tank. You know, there's tons of videos on how you can set up an aquarium. This is just the way I've done it. This is all running in stages from one central sump. What we're going to do is go inside and show you where we start the feeding process. We're going to tell you some of the things that we do feed, and the reactions we noticed with it. So inside the actual bedroom, we have the coral tank that is artificially lit, and this tank's been going for about 3 years. this particular tank for about a year now. We've done lots of moving with different sizes of aquariums. Started at about 40 gallons and now we're at an 80-gallon tank. We take mother colonies here and we frag them out. This is the colonies that I like to keep on hand, so I'm going to be growing these out for the winter time. And the outdoor table will become a refugium, just so we don't need as much light for the coral. Also, we plan on doing a lot of rebuilding and adding the greenhouse outside. So I wanted to document all this before we did the rebuilding as far as what we had beginning. Real simple design, it's all been piece by piece, kind of figure out as we go, you know, all the troubles of maintaining temperature, the light fluctuations, and evaporation. You know, light, temperature, and evaporation tend to be the biggest problems when you're dealing with aquaculturing or having a sustained body of water somewhere. We'll go back outside. We enter all of our food in here, and this includes phytoplankton, zooplanktons, also fermented vegetables that we get from our garden, you know, broccolis, some of the strawberries, some of the lettuces. We take all this and we ferment it in salt water, we dry it out, and then we apply it as a fish food. Also ground it up, it applies as a coral food when you saturate it with salt water. But we take this waste, like I was saying, a lot of waste, so 30 gallons, 50 gallons every week. We put it into our barrel and we allow it to sit for a couple days, a couple weeks. Depending on the temperature and how the bacteria reacts, we then apply it to different parts of our farm or our soils, whether it's to our compost piles or to our vegetables. Some of the things that we've noticed now that we've been doing this for 2 years, 3 years, knowingly how much we use and how often we're doing it, how much water we do use. And in comparison, back here, if I'm talking about the same garden bed up front, which is just using tap water, versus a garden bed back here, which is using our reverse osmosis water combined with our saltwater wastewater. We use the same ratios as about 50 gallons, 50-gallon barrel, and I like to do that every 3 days, every 4 days. Depending upon, you know, right now it's raining, so we're probably going to miss this week of watering. You know, it's kind of helped me on the water bill, but what we're noticing is that up front, during the winter time, right now in particular, is that all those plants up front, they let go. The energy was gone, and the leaves dropped, and pests came in. We did have an invasive beetle that came through and wiped out some of them. We also had the invasive beetle in the same area and back, but it just didn't become as invasive as up front. We had the same number of plants, and in particular it attached to the purple ruffle kale. It's an invasive beetle in San Diego County that they're still figuring out what to do. What I've noticed is the purple ruffle kale back here did quite well against those beetles. This is all the soil that has the salt water being poured onto it. It's a mixture of kales, broccolis, lettuce. We also have some tomatoes, Swiss chard, celery. We kind of mixed it all into here to just see what would grow. We also had corn at one point. Corn was not very tolerant to the salt. It was very stunted. We also kind of mixed it in, too many different species of corn, and I think we had some cross-pollination that affected growth. But one of the effects that we're noticing with this saltwater addition to the soil is not just the fact that, yes, the plants are still alive compared to the tap water ones, but the leaves while growing are thicker. They're greener, and the taste of them is, I'd say, in my comparison to the two garden beds, is a lot more potent, it's a lot more spicy. The lettuces have a more natural nutty flavor. The tomatoes that are growing back here, the richness, the red, the flavor that comes from these tomatoes is a very comparable difference. I love to do testing on it. That is one of the major goals of the video, is to kind of outreach to see who would be interested, to kind of contact us somehow, some way. But what we're doing is just applying. We've taken a lot of years of thinking, a lot of years of research, and now we've started applying it. You know, it's actually taking the money that we have and putting it towards doing this project. And we're really liking the outcome, you know, the fact that I can eat it and feel confident as to what's going into it versus blindly buying something and having confidence that someone else has put into it. It gives me a reassurance. That kind of sums it up for now. Thank you for the time, and have a good one.